All right, welcome in. This is called 5 Minute History. My name's Nick Senemy, aka Teach, and we're going to talk about the French Revolution. So this is the first video in a series of many videos, and I'm just going to describe the setup to you with this PowerPoint right here. So that man right there is Louis XVI. You can tell by his extravagant garb that he had a lot of money. I'm going to try and keep these history lessons brief, short, and to the point, not give you too much information and get you overwhelmed. Plus, I like cracking jokes about people's hairlines. Look at this man's hairline right here. Good gracious. You think with all that money, he'd have a better hairline. Here we go. All right, so portion one is the setup. So the topic, I'm going to give you some who, what, where, when, why about this topic. So if you don't know where France is, I'm not going to call you a dum-dum, but you might be a dum-dum. But just in case you don't know, here's a map right here. I got 3 arrows. France. Go across the Atlantic Ocean. Here's the United States of America right here. France is right there, just in case you don't know. Okay, French Revolution. Who are we talking about? French citizens in particular. Okay, that's who it involves. Now, French society at the time had 3 different classes of people. They were divided by law into classes. They were called the 3 estates. The 3 estates. The first one was the clergy, so those are the religious people. The second estate, those are the money people, the people that have most of the money. And the third estate was everyone else. So society was divided into these 3 separate estates: first, second, and third. So what are we talking about during the French Revolution? So the what is involved? So changing their entire government, which is a pretty big deal. French Revolution is going to change French government and society drastically. In the process of this, they're going to fend off invasion from other European countries that surround France, right in this area right here. And finally, they're going to acquire some new territory. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because I only have 5 minutes. So let's keep it moving. Where? France, obviously, is where this is taking place, and other European countries. And remember, Europe looked drastically different than the Europe that I have on the map right here. In the late 1700s, the map was almost completely different. Okay, so why is the French Revolution going to take place? So food shortages, number one reason. Taxation, another huge reason. Inflation, another big reason. And if all of these sound familiar to issues that go on today, that's because these issues have gone on throughout human history and oftentimes led people to revolt against their governments that don't seem to want to do anything about these problems. And then finally, going back to my man with no hairline, overall discontent with the monarch that was running France at the time, because remember, it was an absolute monarch at the time, meaning they had absolute authority to do anything. Louis XVI and his wife, Maria Antoinette, bore the brunt of the blame for issues that were affecting France at this time. So that's the setup. Let's keep it moving. Bad meeting bad. This is the segment where I want to talk about some awful stuff that took place at the time. And as you can see by the photo that I have right there, that is a severed head being held up by a man. It was just removed via this device called the guillotine. And you're probably familiar with the guillotine, but if you're not, this was a device used to execute people in France during this time. It was actually developed by a doctor, a physician, who thought this would be a more humane way to execute people than other methods. Created by a doctor. Kind of insane. So as you can see, there's a huge blade at the very top of this device. So they would put you into it. Hands are bound, feet are bound. Drop the knife on your head. Your severed head lands in this basket and you are killed almost instantaneously. There were 17,000 people thereabouts executed with no trial or fake trials during the French Revolution by this device. And the ironic thing about all of this is because there was an entity called the Community for Public Safety that was responsible for sending a lot of people to the guillotine with little to no evidence of any wrongdoing. The Community for Public Safety. Think about that for a second. It's supposed to keep the public safe, but executed 17,000 people via the guillotine. Pretty terrible, pretty awful. So after we talk about something awful, I like to talk about something that's nice or thoughtful. So I have a shine bright segment right here. So that man right there is Marquis Layfette. So during this time, as I said before, France is going to reorganize their entire society in a matter of like 26 years. Okay, they're going to redo their entire government multiple times. They're going to write several constitutions. And this man in particular was responsible for writing one of the main documents that all the constitutions were based on. Okay, so he came up with a whole bunch of different freedoms that were very similar to the freedoms that were established during the American Revolution. All men are created equal. They should all have equal access to different things in society, and they should all be treated fairly in the eyes of the law. Now, something to remember about this didn't apply to women, okay? Didn't apply to women in America, nor did it apply to women in France at the time. So all these ideas sound very good. Women are left out a lot. Okay, segment for the ladies and the fellas. This is where I like to talk about women that were important or other people that you don't really get to see in history books or hear about because they're ignored or they happen to be minorities and they don't fit into a narrative that history books will tell you. So one thing that happened during the French Revolution was this thing called the March on Versailles. So there's a Palace of Versailles that is just outside Paris where the royal family would stay, okay? Very opulent, very gaudy. Think Kardashians of the late 1700s, all right? So women at the time, specifically women that were in the working and middle classes, you can see it in my photo right here, going to march to the Palace of Versailles where Antoinette is staying. Now, remember something about French society at this time. Even though people were struggling and didn't have enough food and didn't have jobs and inflation was very high, she was still living this like life of luxury, and people were very resentful of that. So a large contingent of women decided to march on the palace and actually stormed the palace and made the royal family return to Paris. So they couldn't escape from the populace and what the populace was demanding. Okay. And the royal family from this point forward is going to be in very bad shape. And eventually they're both going to be executed, Maria Antoinette and Louis XVI. Finally, something you might not know. If you don't know, now you know. That man right there is Maximilien Robespierre. So he was the man that was in charge of this community for public safety that was executing all these people via the guillotine. And the ironic thing about that is he is eventually found guilty of one crime or another, could have been made up, and he is sentenced to the guillotine and is actually executed. So he's one of the primary guys that's responsible for the large number of people that were executed during this time. And then finally, just to sum it all up for y'all, France's Revolution occurred shortly after the American Revolution and was modeled in some ways on the American Revolution. It also varied in several distinct ways. All in all, I think it's safe to say this era in history has laid the groundwork for their general attitude towards government today. I feel like, in my opinion, the French seem to be much more engaged in their government than Americans and are more likely to let their discontent be heard. So that's wrapping it up on the French Revolution. Quick 5-minute history lesson. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm going to come up with more topics coming soon.